I'm James Hughes, bioethicist and resident techno-progressive.
And I'm Nir Eisikovits, philosopher and resident Luddite.
And you're listening to Prosthetic Gods, an optimist and a grump on tech, a podcast where we explore the social, ethical, and political impacts of emerging technologies.
Dr. Hughes, a very good rainy morning to you. How are you?
I am fine, I guess. I mean, I always feel obliged, as many do now, to qualify it in terms of the national situation.
You didn't sound very okay. Committed to your fineness right there.
That's right.
Well, so to cheer you up, we're going to talk about technology and religion today. Maybe start with AI and religion, but branch out to talk about technology and religion more broadly. And I'll confess, I proposed this topic provoked by the Pray.com videos, which is a company that has been putting up pretty high production videos of scenes from the Bible generated primarily through biblical text. And the result has the combined aesthetic of Game of Thrones and the promo of, the latest first-person shooter game. And I have to say, it won't be a surprise to you that that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. So maybe before I say what rubbed me the wrong way, I'll ask, did you see these and what do you think if you did?
I haven't seen that in particular, but I've seen many similar things. You know, what would Jesus do? Apps and other kinds of technology intrusions into religious life. I don't find it particularly disturbing. I mean, I think what is that? There's a string that Orthodox Jews tie someplace on their body to remind them to pray or remind them of prayers.
I don't know, but there's various, correlates
there's the box. Prayer. What's the little box?
Oh, the tefillin.
Tefillin, yeah.
Tefillin.
So, there have been technologies used for millennia to remind people.
That's not a technology per se. That's a kind of reference to scripture, but your point stands with prayer beads and stuff like that. So there's technologies that remind people to pray. Well, so let me specifically tell you about the videos. So again, like I said, you'll have a video of the David and Goliath story, for example, or you'll have a video of some the Exodus from Egypt, right? And again, these will look like Medal of Honor, essentially, like the video game Medal of Honor, or like something from a science fiction show. And I guess the first sort of point I wanted to make about it was that if at least some of the both spiritual and sociological function of religion is transcendence, is to make you feel part of something that you're larger from, I think that aesthetic is self-defeating. In other words, I think that it brings the practice down. The sort of customization of it to fit existing tastes is counterproductive to what religion wants to do. So it kind of undermines tendencies for the sacred and holy. You don't think so? And this is different. This is different from, I guess we should first establish how something like the prayer.com videos is different from a bead or a meditation app. It's not a technology to facilitate X, Y, Z. It's kind of, instead of reading the Bible, which is hard, complicated, messy, and contradictory, why don't I show you this, idiotic video?
Well, as usual, I think your interpretation is completely ahistorical and nonsensical.
Okay. Let me. Now that we have that established.
Yeah. I started studying religion as a teenager. When I became a Buddhist, I had been raised Unitarian, had an interest in why I was living in a society that believed crazy things. I considered going into ministry after college. I ordained as a monk. I did my bachelor's thesis on Pentecostalism. So I've had a long interest in the sociology of religion. I guess what I've come to realize is that my perspective is kind of like the St. Augustine line that there's a God-shaped hole in human culture, human psychology. There is an attempt, we're constantly attempting to connect ourselves to meaning, and every generation has to take the received history of their meaning making and reinterpret it for their times. So every time a minister gives a sermon, they are reinterpreting time-old verities in ways that they hope will connect with and serve the needs of the people in their community. And I think that that is a service. And I don't think that using ChatGPT to come up with the best way to communicate, like we just had an example 2 weeks ago where one of our listeners responded to us with Hebrew about disagreeing with my point of view, and I responded to him with Hebrew because ChatGPT told me what the appropriate Hebrew line would be to respond to that particular thing, right? So
you thought about it and you knew what to search for, and you've studied the history and the sociology of religion for 30, 40 years. It's a very different story than someone who says, I want to know the Bible. Let me see how ChatGPT interprets the David and Goliath story, as long as it looks like Game of Thrones.
Well, it's only been in the last 100 years that most people could read the Bible. And the idea that reading the Bible was the way to faith is a relatively new one, right? For the Catholics, it was the intermediation with priests, both to God and to the Word. And with Jews, it's with rabbis. I mean, how many Jews would say that they know the Talmud, well enough to argue about it? I just don't think that that's true. So for the vast majority
answer to
of
that
believers,
is to make the rest of them dumber too?
No, I'm giving you an example of, I used ChatGPT to do, and I do it on a fairly frequent basis, ask it questions about religious history, religious ideology. I just asked it this morning, what percentage of Americans believe that we're in the end times? Because yesterday there was a huge phenomenon, I don't know if you clocked it, but a huge phenomenon of evangelical Christians who thought that yesterday was going to be the rapture. It turns out 40% of Americans believe that we're in the end times, whatever that means. 10% believe that the end times will happen in their lifetime. And globally, it's about 15% of people who believe that the end times will happen in their lifetime. So there's a significant proportion of the population who is living, expecting religious stuff to happen today. And I think that shapes, there's a million times more of those people than there are people who believe in technological promises or technological salvation. But okay, back to your question. Does technology used as a medium for religious instruction somehow demean religious instruction? No. Technology has always been used since the first written word for religious instruction. It does not demean it in any way.
Let me read you a couple of quotes from the founder of this company that makes the biblical video. What Spotify does for the music industry, we do for the faith industry. And then a different quote he gave in a different interview, or the same interview. We are in this groove where we know what people really enjoy and engage with. And essentially, and here it's me rather than him, we're going to give them more of it. Going back
if you're unhappy with people using consumerist logic to pick their faith, then you're basically unhappy with religious freedom. One of the principal sociological observations is that Americans are more religious than a lot of people around the world because we never had a state religion. Because people here were able to start their own little cult and get whatever people to join it that they could, right? So religious freedom means that people are going to choose on the basis of their predilections.
According to your logic, though, if growing numbers of Americans feel that, according to your logic, married to the logic of the founder of Pray.com, if growing numbers of Americans feel that we're in the end times and the apocalypse is upon us, et cetera, the only thing that makes sense is to give them more of that, or there's no reason not to give them more of that, either in the name of the market or religious freedom, which is the same for you.
That's the problem with free speech. There are a lot of people who have bad beliefs that I would like to fight in the arena of public ideas, including religious ideas. And I don't think that the way to fight them is to just cast aspersions on people who come up with religious tech?
No, but also legitimate the idea, and this is probably where we disagree quite often, but legitimate the idea that there's a hierarchy in religious practice, that these texts are complicated, that people are not only looking to have their prejudices and their misconceptions reaffirmed by religion, but also looking for the sacred and exalted. And as a result, there's parts of religion that should be outside of the logic of the market and unpayable and not, be analogized to Spotify. I just think that a Spotify religion is going to do shit for people. Is not going to fill their spiritual needs. You don't find that?
I hold no brief for these particular tools, although I have been in touch with people who are trying to do the same thing in a Buddhist context. Have Buddhist teachings be articulated by chatbots.
I mean, let's dig down to that. What specifically are they trying to do? Because though it may sound as a completely Luddite point, actually this isn't. I'm not saying there isn't a role for technology in religious practice. I think that this kind of technological innovation in religious practice that totally takes its bearings from demand in the market, from logic of the market, we're into this groove of figuring out what people want, blah, 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 I think is counterproductive to religion doing what it's supposed to be doing. But I think so tell me about the Buddhist tools.
Okay. Well, we would call the problem that you're articulating spiritual materialism, or an aspect of spiritual materialism, that it's people shopping for the guru, for the teaching that they want to follow, and ignoring the ones that they don't, and ignoring the aspects of the tradition that they don't want to pay attention to.
Yeah.
And that's been a big problem for Western Buddhism because...
especially for Buddhism, I would think, right?
Well, it's a big problem in any time and place, really. But for Western Buddhists, it was a problem because we rejected all the moral aspects of Buddhism and just focused on the meditative. And
the metaphysical also.
And the metaphysics.
Yeah.
And it turns out that if you instantiate some guy that you think is God and then throw out all the morality, that they get away with an awful lot. So we had a lot of problems in that regard. So and that was part of my hermeneutic approach when I was a young exegetical writer in Buddhism. It was to say everything that's not Unitarian socialist feminism isn't real Buddhism, and only the real Buddhism was socialist feminist. So that's not a good hermeneutic approach either. So yeah, I believe we all should, as a personal spiritual practice, we should grapple with all the rough edges of our historical religious traditions, all the crimes that our religions have committed, et cetera, and not just gloss over that. But in the context of religious freedom, if you're saying that, someone's obsessed with the Book of Revelations and apocalyptic thinking, that is a tradition within Western religion, within Judaism, within Buddhism. The largest mass murder in China occurred because of a Christian Buddhist apocalyptic uprising 100, 200 years ago. And so all around the world, there is this need for this kind of religious meaning. And if you're saying that real religion and real religious tools should only tell people that that's not important, I don't know where you're coming off. I mean, people decide what's important in religion. They get to decide. You don't get to decide.
No, I have some beef with the idea of the complete democratizing of religious practice that you're offering, because what it marginalizes is the richness and complexity of those texts. So anybody obsessed, for example, with a specific story in the Old Testament is most likely missing the multi-layeredness and the complexity of the story. And so there's something to be said with grappling with the text of the story. So, for example, somebody, and for that matter, even the moral critique of the religion is never going to come out of engaging with AI videos. So would somebody engaging with an AI video of the story of Exodus and the plagues on Egypt, et cetera, have any chance of grappling with the kind of questions of free will that arise from that story, and what God, how God hardens Pharaoh's heart, for example, and was God behaving immorally in that context, and was that Pharaoh's decision or God using Pharaoh as a tool? And so on. And so the book of Genesis has, more than one account of creation. Would an AI slop version of creation bring any of that out? So my second critique, in addition to the fact that these kind of video game aesthetics, market-driven, undermine the logic of the sacred, is that they do an injustice to the practice and the text themselves by focusing on...
You're in a country where for 200 years, at least, Christians have been doing all kinds of crazy stuff. They rewrite the Bible in teen hip lingo. They come up with rock musicals.
Yeah, but you celebrate it. You celebrate that. I think that is a regrettable cost of democracy. I'm not saying take it away. I'm just saying, do we drive more people
You're not even religious. Why do you care?
What?
Don't you believe in the advance of reason and secularization as I do?
I'm a Burkean, so I'm not religion, but I believe
you're a functionalist.
Yeah, exactly. I believe religion.
Okay, well,
religion has a function, and I want to buy into the best version of my tradition, which this is
on
not.
Burkean functionalist grounds. You should pay attention to the fact that religion is weakest in Europe, that had state religions where people paid tithes through taxes. And it's strongest in the country that gave freedom of religion because everyone got to find their own.
But what is strongest?
Religious belief is strongest in the United States.
Nothing's left of it. It became stronger by becoming empty. That's the point. That if the AI
who are the true
of
believers in the world, Nir, that you want us to emulate? Was it the Taliban? I don't understand what your goal here is.
No, I'm not making it out. My goal is that religion fulfills its function when it is wed to an idea of majesty, and that your affection for these kind of tools empties it out of majesty, empties it out of transcendence, empties it out of ideas of the holy. I think religion and complete customization, which you celebrate, don't go together very easily. Maybe that is the cost of freedom, but then it's not something to be celebrated.
There are distinct technological things to talk about in this context. The fact that technology is one of the modalities that people are making religious choices or pursuing religious instruction today, that is not a relevant point here. Let's talk about ways that religion
why is it not a relevant point when technology is driven by market forces completely?
It's like saying televangelism, right? The televangelism started with the radio back in the 1910s, 1920s.
Yeah.
People had exactly the same concerns with televangelism. They had exactly the same concerns with the introduction of music.
Yeah, they were right.
Services. Well, okay, so I don't know what you're not even religious, so I don't understand what the point is.
It's not about being religious. I mean, first of all, I'm not religious, but I enjoy religious traditions. And I am a keen enough observer, though you would disagree, to see that they do the most for people when they reserve and keep a non-customizable, non-optional set of features. My sense is that in an example like the AI videos made of the Bible is a fail.
So you think for functionalist reasons there should be a state religion in the United States?
Let's just explain to our listeners what functionalism is, just to make sure we're all on the same page.
That the institutions that exist serve social functions, and that we
and psychological functions.
Psychological, social functions, and that we shouldn't change them willy-nilly because they serve those functions.
Exactly. So that's a key Burkean point. Religion, whether or not you believe in its contents, is socially and psychologically important to people, morally important to people, etc.
And the usual perspective that's counterposed to that is the critical perspective that institutions actually serve the powerful over the weak, and that they need to be changed in order to not do that. And I think both things are true. Religion, there is a God-shaped hole in our consciousness. The death of God has had psychological consequences. And religion serves a lot of bad purposes and could be better served by other things other than religion. So that's why I'm a secularist, right?
Yeah. I'm not a secularist. I don't happen to believe in the contents of religion, but I want to marinate in it and next to it.
Stupid people need it, but not for
no.
For
I mean, I need it too. I just don't have. I mean, by the way, in Judaism, belief is not such a big. That's why we have so many mitzvahs.
Practice.
Yeah.
Right.
Let me test your intuitions on a related example and see if we can bring you to the light. What about these? God chatbots and pastoral chatbots? So the chatbot in which the chatbot that emulates God from the New York Times recent story, or the chatbot that replaces your pastor, as far as you're concerned, they're the same as therapy chatbots?
In Tibet in 900 AD, monks would say...
Asking about chatbots, you talk about Tibet in 900
yeah,
AD.
because it's exactly the same thing. In 900 AD, they started going out and digging up texts that had been buried by the Buddha. They're called termas.
Okay.
And lo and behold, they would be instructions for how to build a contemporary spy network in the Tibetan monastic institutions, or whatever it was.
Okay.
And so religion adapts, right? And people can make up new dispensations, new texts. Mormonism, all of Mormonism is basically a made-up text that tried to situate Christians in North America. And so I don't understand where you think that there's this thing called real religion that has to be protected. Religion is whatever people are doing at any particular moment.
Yeah, look,
and this is what they're doing.
Yeah,
right?
I'm just saying, for example, if you're a Christian, or if you're a Muslim and you really think that the Bible is the word of God, then I don't think you get to say, and it's okay to consume it through Spotify or Game of Thrones like videos. I think those.
But why should you decide that? Why shouldn't people who believe in the word of God decide that? And they do. They're deciding with their feet.
You think the idea of the word of God sits comfortably with consuming it through the same business model as Spotify?
God works in mysterious ways, Nir.
Super mysterious, man.
He comes to us through all kinds of media, and I see God in Thai television for some reason. So I've been looking closely at Thai television.
Okay. All right. I wouldn't want you as my pastor, but you didn't answer my question.
You're like someone who wants to debate the least important question in the whole syllabus.
You just don't get the question. You're like the student who doesn't get the question. Well, you didn't answer my question though. But from before, you're fine with chatbot God, ChatGPT-6, where you talk to God, because that's already a thing.
I would prefer that people talk to chatbot atheists and overcome,
or maybe to real people. God help us.
Or even to real people. But I would,
as long as it's not me, right?
that the secular rationalist agenda move forward, and that people wake up from religious delusions, don't think that they have to sell all their property because the rapture's happening today, things like that. That's what I really wish for. Mm-hmm. Do I have an opinion about whether it's better for people to talk to a chatbot deity or to talk to their priest about what the deity thinks, or to just pray and make it up in their head? I don't know. I don't care. It's their problem, really. People all around the world believe in all kinds of things, and they're going to figure out how they communicate with their deities. I think that we're going to see technological religions. We're going to see technologically mediated religions. And that's what I think we should be talking about, is the ways in which the God-shaped hole in people's psyche is being filled both by technology and by mixtures of technology and religion. So in the sense that, the apocalyptic and eschatological beliefs of religion are forming a template for the kinds of expectations that people have about the techno-rapture, the techno end of times. And so I think that that's really the way that things are. And Peter Thiel, just last week, he gave 4 lectures, or maybe he's not even done yet, but he's been giving lectures about his belief that we're in the end times, and that Greta Thunberg is the Antichrist, and that only full steam ahead on technology will save us from the Antichrist. So, the fact that the most influential tech intellectual of the tech right is a full-time Christian evangelical end times believer is, I think, something that we should be talking about, rather than your distaste for the way that people happen to interface with their faith.
See, they're profoundly related, because if you take my view here seriously, Peter Thiel doesn't get to say that, or doesn't get to be taken seriously.
I would never say that Peter Thiel should not be able to give those lectures. Is that what you want?
No, he should be given. He should be able to say whatever he wants, but nobody should take his views on religion seriously just because he has a lot of money and has been influential in Silicon Valley. He doesn't understand. He has a profound misunderstanding of what religion is. And look, I think this is I think this goes back to a fundamental disagreement between us, and it's in a way one of the most interesting examples of it. Being a liberal, you think that, or a social democratic version of a liberal, you think that the source of meaning comes from customization, and the more of it, the better. And myself, being a Burkean and not really a liberal, or not a liberal in the same vein that you are, at least, I think that an important source of meaning comes from non-customization and from the inheriting of certain institutions where you think about any changes and modifications to them with a great degree of care, knowing that if you are allowed to, or allowed to you don't like, but if you're prone to customize them too much, you destroy them. And I think that's a real difference in worldview, what makes a human life meaningful. And I think part of it is this kind of notion of institutions handed down to you that you mess with carefully.
Well, I'll just say it again. I think every generation messes with their religious and cultural traditions, reinterprets them, creates new.
Yeah, messing a little is okay. You're fine with messing a lot, and I'm trying to say mess a lot.
When you say I'm fine with it, I'm as a liberal, I don't think that there should be any intervention in the way that people do these things. I mean, I think there's some phase.
In the end, I agree with you. I mean, our conversations are not intervention. I'm willing to.
Do I think that there are moral judgments to be made about better and worse beliefs? I absolutely do. I mean, I think that there are the epistemologies that are too far away from reason and scientific materialism get into bad shape, and that therefore we should be promoting.
And the epistemologies that misunderstand the psychology and the sociology of religion also in the end get into.
I think there's a reason to prefer and to promote religious views that are consistent with scientific modernity, and that's basic Unitarianism as far as I'm concerned. That's where I learned that. And I think every religious tradition has people within it who want to adapt to the modern world and to democracy and to individual freedom, and people who don't.
I think that is true under, again, not that I would want to regulate this, but I think that is true under a condition. And that condition is, it should be fine for J. Hughes, who has spent a lifetime studying these kind of things, who knows the precepts of the actual religion well enough to discern what's consistent with scientific materialism and what's not, and what is not that offensive to scientific materialism, if not consistent with it, to be allowed to be left there, et cetera, et cetera. But if you accept this kind of world that is offered to us by Pray.com and the Bible AI videos, these are people who would only get the kind of view that, I mean, not that it would be consistent with any kind of scientific material, but they would only get the kind of slop version. They would only get the exciting Star Wars-like version of religion, because it wouldn't serve as a gateway interest to looking. Somebody who sees a Game of Thrones version of the Bible isn't going to say, "Shit, this is so fascinating and moving. Let me now go and compare the two accounts of Genesis."
You're entirely wrong about that. I think the more religious education that people are exposed to, the more a fraction of that population is going to be interested in, well, what did it say in the original Greek? Is that really what it meant? And I grew up next to a guy who learned Greek so that he could be a better evangelical. And I think that there are people who would be inspired to further religious scholarship.
Yeah,
now,
but
would it
not
necessarily
by
land them
this.
where I want them to? Probably not.
No, I don't. Yeah, and here we agree. I don't care where it lands them. I would like people to be serious about religion so that they can seriously either embrace it or reject it. This is a way that leads far from there. I just, the whole point of this, as the CEO of the company proudly admits, is to essentially meet a market demand. And they've been successful, by the way. They've brought in a demographic of young men who have been sort of moving away from religion until quite recently. They've increased their engagement with religion. So of the many millions of views these guys have, a lot of them are young men who I guess weren't so engaged before.
Research on online radicalization, if that's what you're hinting at.
There is online radicalization. Not, by the way.
Well, okay. I am concerned about online radicalization, especially of religious right-wing incel men around the world. It's a global phenomenon. It's part of the global patriarchal backlash against women's freedom that has been driving a large part of the fascist backlash. So I'm concerned about online radicalization, but the evidence so far is that when young men or when people join extreme movements, it's not because of online radicals. It's not because of an algorithm funneled them down to that YouTube video that finally convinced them. It's because their friends are talking about how the Jews did it. And then they go online and they say, did the Jews do it? And they found videos about how the Jews did it. So that's how this all comes about, right? Mm-hmm. It's not yet being driven online, but the online is parallel to and certainly reflects this kind of phenomenon. And to the extent that we should be getting hate speech off of the online platforms, I don't think it should be there. But should we get religious speech off of online platforms? No, I don't think so. And that's a huge part of YouTube. It's a huge part of the podcast world, the Christian podcasts. And so if you're going to say that people should only be they should only go to Talmud study in order to learn about their religion. I don't understand your idea of what you think popular religiosity ever was. But before people were reading, it wasn't anything except going to church and being told what to believe.
A hierarchy wherein careful text study is far superior to watching AI videos of the similar content,
and that Ashkenazi bias. You have
it's a Burkean elitist bias. It's not an Ashkenazi bias. It's not only Ashkenazis that take text study seriously, but it is a clear argument saying that there are more and less serious forms of doing religion. And that the liberal notion that everything should be subjected to the logic of the market because it's the least bad option and the alternative is some kind of despotism is nonsense. That we all think intuitively, even the old MasterCard commercials realize this, that there's some things that money can't buy. And this should be one of them. And if you let it into the logic of the market, I think you get yourself in trouble. But I do want to ask you specifically, because I'm curious about an area of your own practice. You hinted at this earlier, and this is and this has to do with the sort of American adoption of Buddhist practice. So, you'll tell the story much more compellingly than I do, but the cartoon version is, since we're talking about cartoon versions, the cartoon version is a realization of, sort of a lot of refugees of the 60s that the meditative practices that are part of Buddhism can have profound health and mental health effects, a lot of studying of that, and then the sort of importation, which I'm a fan of, by the way, so here I'm being inconsistent, of meditative practices into our Western religious repertoire. And the critique, of course, has been that you are importing a part of the religion without the metaphysics, and as a result, you're kind of getting an emptied out, hollowed out version. So I'm curious. You started saying something about that, but I want to sound you out a little bit more on that.
Well, the entire history of religion is the selective interpretation of select texts. When Buddhism was coming into China, it was monks going to India, strapping a text on their back, hauling it back to China and translating it, and then that would become the basis of some new doctrine or school, that one text. And so we always have these partial, we're always grabbing the part of the elephant and trying to interpret from it. But it's also motivated by what the needs are at the time. So the Buddhists in China were struggling against Confucianism, and so some of the aspects had to be changed to help with the struggle against Confucianism. The problem for the hippies was, as they saw it at any rate, the conformity and moral pressures of 1950s America. And they saw Buddhism as a promise of radical antinomian freedom. And certainly some of the Zen that they were reading could be interpreted that way. But interpreting Buddhism as a tradition that doesn't have anything to say about how you should live your life, the moral codes that you should live by, was entirely wrong and led to a lot of problems. And so that was what I was saying, was that the whole Western incorporation of Buddhism was an example of selective incorporation that left a lot on the table that they needed to grapple with and have grappled with better since. Although a lot of it's irrelevant too.
Who's grappled?
What?
Who's grappled?
Grappling with, for instance, an injunction against intoxication or an injunction against the meat eating and murder. That was a pretty natural one. But there are various things that had to be kind of reintroduced into the Western Buddhist canon. But look, I don't think it's. I think it's just a natural and repeated historical phenomenon that people are always reinterpreting their religious faith, and they're using the technologies and needs of the time to do it. So let me just say, I understand where you're coming from. I think you're entirely wrong. I think it's an ahistorical approach to things to reify true religion and true religious scholarship that only 1% of anybody ever had an opportunity to practice in life. And that what we really should be doing is saying, are these technologies promoting faiths in good or bad ways? This gets to the question.
By the way, you can't say I'm ahistorical if this is a historical reoccurring conflict between elitist versions of a religion and more popular ones. I mean, this is as old as any church or any religious practice.
So yeah, it's historical in the sense that you would have been complaining that passion plays were dumbing down the gospel message and that only priests in the monasteries really understood what was really going on. These passion plays, they don't actually teach people anything. It's like, okay, whatever.
So your response to my series of profound arguments is whatever?
Yeah, I mean, it's also whatever because as with so many of your complaints about modernity, there's no upshot. It's all,
of course,
I don't like it. And it's like, okay, Nir, you don't like it.
No.
Don't do it, Nir, if you don't like it.
First of all, I don't. And second of all, the only upshot is not that I don't like it. The upshot is I wouldn't want to ban anybody from watching their beautiful Call of Duty videos of religion. I would just want to convince the marketplace and the marketplace of ideas, which is what we're doing here, is that there's better ways of doing it. And that I don't believe it's going to be a sort of gateway provocation into those better ways. And that if people are fascinated and have a God-shaped hole in their heart, as you put it, the right place for filling that hole or for at least satiating their curiosity, which is what I do because I don't have a God-shaped hole in my heart, but I am curious, is to read the Bible, which is an amazing book, to maybe potentially, like you said, study Hebrew and study Greek, etc., etc. Will everybody do that? No. Will the chance of more people doing that be made higher by consuming this stuff on social media? No. As we know from social media, it will make the chance higher of people consuming even more crap on social media. So I do think there's something to do about it. You just don't like what I think there's to do about it.
I guarantee you that there's a higher percentage of Christians studying biblical exegesis today than at any point in previous
because they've
history.
watched Bible.com videos because of literacy.
The spread of literacy, the spread of education.
Yeah, those
middle
are
class.
It will surprise you to learn. I think those are good things.
Yeah. So I just don't share your assessment of the situation. I think this has been a high time for people going as deep down the religious rabbit hole as they can possibly go. And these are just tools to help them along the way. Now, what I think we should be talking about again is the way that all of this shapes how we approach technology today. And we've already talked about, like when we talked about long-termism, I think one of the things to understand about long-termism is these are 99% secular people grappling with what it means to make meaning in the world today. And they came up with a solution that they had an obligation to all future people to sacrifice their own welfare for their benefit. And that seems to me to be, a technology-related faith filling that God-shaped hole. And I see that all around in the way that technology, it's both from Peter Thiel, who's explicit about his religious convictions, but also the determined secularists or atheists who say, no, this is just scientific prediction. And it's like, yeah, but your scientific prediction looks a hell of a lot like the apocalypse. So
explain your concern to me a bit more specifically. If you abstract from Peter Thiel for a moment, who we both don't like, but for different reasons.
Well, I think the concern is Peter Thiel is emblematic of the fact that the tech right in particular, but the technology-focused parts of the population, we think about it as Silicon Valley, but all of us around the country who have been plugged into technofuturism, that there are lots of strains of religious practice, belief that have infiltrated. I think the classic example is Roko's basilisk, which is on the form less wrong, which is a rationalist form that's associated with Ellie Yudkowsky, who we've invited to be on the program. Ellie, if you're listening, please come on the program. And Ellie Yudkowsky's less wrong forum, the people brought up the idea that a future AI would be smart enough to go back and punish all the people who didn't bring it into existence, who were trying to not bring it into existence. And this was called the Roko's basilisk problem. And they banned discussion of it because it became it was like their codex of dangerous ideas that they didn't want to have floating out there for the future AI. I think the cat's already out of the bag. Everyone's talking about Roko's basilisk. So when you get to the point where certain ideas are too dangerous to be discussed in your fora because, they could give bad gods bad ideas. And the whole idea of the singularity is basically demonology. It's like, when is something going to pop out of the box that we didn't have the right pentagram around and it's going to destroy us all? And what kinds of super guardian angels do we need to invoke in order to protect us from that? That's basically what the singularity debate was up until LLMs, and then people got more real about it.
I mean, part of what I'm hearing you is that there's a sort of hyper Promethean tendency on the tech right, or at least this is where I take the kind of comment that you make, that there's a hyper Promethean tendency on the tech right to essentially, replace God, or to, the sort of extreme.
There's some who are explicit about wanting to replace God.
The extreme tendency in Silicon Valley to tech solutionalism is a religious impulse.
Exactly.
In the end, and I think it's a very bad religious impulse. I think that.
On that we agree.
Yeah. And I think for sort of reasons having to do with humility and being skeptical of the history of the Promethean, impulse. Ironically enough, and that's part of what I found so ironic about the Prey.com videos. There's something very godlike about generative AI, the sort of creation by the word, right? The kind of ex nihilo, let me put in a prompt and, look at the thing, create a beautiful world. That's primarily metaphorical, but certainly this kind of impulse to solve everything and to solve everything within the constraints of the market, so that you also make money from completely solving old age to completely solving sleep or whatever it is a problematic religious impulse. I certainly think it'd be a good idea to improve some stuff, but
the story I usually tell about transhumanism is that as soon as we were capable of conscious, of thought, of abstract thought, people probably started to imagine what it'd be like to have bodies that didn't age, get sick, die, great wisdom, and societies where there was no hunger and no war. And so these ideas of utopianism and biomeliorism, as it's sometimes called, I think those are ancient, probably 200,000 years old in some ways. It's just that until the Enlightenment, all of the expressions of those ideas were religious. And in the Enlightenment, a lot of that got secularized into a doctrine of progress, a doctrine of social perfectionism, and biological perfectionism. And that's basically, my project is I don't want to disparage the religious origins or content or shape of contemporary technological thought, because I understand that that's where it came from, and it is an expression of that. I just want us all to be cognizant that we're doing religion when we do this kind of technological futurism, because it does shape the way that we think about things, specifically in about our expectation, how quickly we think things are going to change. And the reason I keep pointing to that millennialism belief is that the worse things get for us, the more millennialist people are probably going to be, right? The world is going to look increasingly like the end times this century. And I think a lot of people are going to be looking for those kinds of solutions, quick fixes for history.
So in our previous episode, we talked about techno-progressivism, slightly distinguished from futurism. So is your
slightly distinguished?
my British understatements. So you wouldn't view your own techno-progressivism as a form of religious practice?
Well, when I survey the people who have identified as techno-progressives, they range all the way from Marxist-Leninists to liberals to European liberals. And so most of them, 90% of them secular. But the real question is, in terms of technological utopianism, do they believe that there's going to be a singularity, a singular historical event in their lifetime that will change all human history? Mm-hmm. And I'd say only about a third of techno-progressives or transhumanists actually believed that back when I was doing this surveying. It may be a lot more now because of the advent of LLMs and the moving up of timelines that people have about that. But still, it's not a universal belief on the part of tech futurists that there's going to be some point at which everything changes. I would say that's the most clear influence of religion, but also the notion of what is the good. I mean, the fact that we now have promises, we can make the blind walk, we can make the blind see, we can make the lame walk. All of the promises of religion are being fulfilled by technology. And so insofar as that's
true.
Some of
the promises.
Well, which ones do you want, Neil? We're working on it.
Those are good. It's just like, I think part of the point is that there's an endless array of promises of religion. But yeah, some of the most attractive ones. I do want to surprise you and give you a sort of optimistic vision of how religion and technology can coexist, so that to complicate your story of me making cave paintings and being pleased with them as the last moment of technological progress, and that vision is something similar to what our philosophy colleague at UMass Lowell has created, this AI app that engages with text. So their app, which I'm blanking on its name, we'll put in the show note later because it's very cool. But their app is essentially an AI app to, engage with some important text, be it Walden or Jane Austen or whatever, by training a large language model on the work of some especially attractive scholars of that text, and including some interviews with the result being that you can read Walden and have a conversation while you're reading Walden with a large language model that is essentially an embodiment of an expert on Walden. And I think that's amazing. I would use that in class tomorrow. And so I think, if you had something like that with the Bible or with the Talmud or with St. Augustine or with whatever you wanted, I would be jumping up and down from excitement about that. Or maybe just like leaping, because I don't jump and down, like leaping mildly. And the reason, just to finish that point, to connect it back to the sort of philosophical framework, the reason I like that is because I think that form of technological engagement with religion recognizes the hierarchy between the text, which is more important, and I am a Jew, and we love the text, which is more important, and the user's preferences, which are subordinate in some way to the text. Where I think that the Pray.com videos go wrong is that they inverse that hierarchy. So I'm not anti-technological, I'm pro-hierarchy, if you will, inscribing the technological use or proscribing the technological use.
Okay. So the Martha Stewart of religious technology.
There you
which
go.
Ones are gross,
there you go. I thought I'd get a compliment, but I'm the Martha Stewart of religious technologies. Apropos Martha Stewart, we should move to our section of billionaires behaving badly.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so the big thing in the news this week, as far as I'm concerned about technology, is that there's been a consolidation on the media technology front, or there are attempts to make a consolidation on the media technology front that I think are further signs of our turn down the authoritarian path. And the one that stuck in my craw this week, in addition to Jimmy Kimmel, the fact that they occurred at the same time was important, but the Jimmy Kimmel thing was important. But also the fact that the TikTok deal got reached.
Let's just tell our listeners who were on vacation these last few days what happened with Jimmy Kimmel.
Well, last week, the FCC chair said that he was going to start making moves to get Jimmy Kimmel penalized, and then he had made some comments about the shooting of Charlie Kirk, and then his show was canceled, precipitously canceled.
Okay.
And there was a week of backlash to that were successful, and Jimmy Kimmel has been reinstated, although the media consolidation of Sinclair Corp, which owns 86 of the major news broadcasting television stations around the country, and also Nexstar, which owns another chunk of them. That means a quarter of the TV stations in the country are still Trump allies, and they have decided not to air Jimmy Kimmel this week. We'll see how long that lasts. But so that was the controversy this week, is like, are we at the Russian stage of, troops going and arresting dissident journalists on air? Or are we able to push back on that? And the FCC threatening the licenses of companies because they don't toe the Trump line. Now, but I think the other point of the news, which is about the technology consolidation as well, is that TikTok the algorithm has been controlled by ByteDance from China. And that has been a legitimate, in my opinion, a legitimate national security concern. But unfortunately, the solution that they came up with was to transfer it primarily to the ownership of Larry Ellison, who is a Trump ally. So the TikTok users will no longer see, pro-Chinese content as often on the platform, and we'll see a lot more pro-MAGA content. And the reason that that's a technology story is that these technologies have scattered our audiences, but also consolidated them in certain ways. That Facebook, the big four technology companies have converged with the big media companies, and they're increasingly controlled by just a handful of corporate masters. And those handful of corporate masters turn out to have a lot of bread buttered by the Trump administration, and so they're all bending the knee as quickly as they can. The Jimmy Kimmel resolution is a positive one this week, and maybe the sign of people finding their spines. Even Ted Cruz spoke out against the FCC being thuggish in this regard. So we'll just have to see. But I think it's a bad situation because we don't know what the new media are going to be. Radio and television were centralizing media because as opposed to print, which basically had low entry bars. People could buy their own printing presses and make their own leaflets or whatever, although they couldn't reach very many people. Pirate radio has never really been a big thing, and pirate television even less. So we just don't have the same media today. We have this diffusion of media into a million different corners, but all of it turns out to be controlled in the end by big corporate masters.
So you're saying that market failures that mean consolidation and monopoly really have moved us from the fire of Chinese Communist Party control to the frying pan of MAGA-affiliated millionaire control in the United States.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't know exactly what to do about it, but it's not inevitable that corporate consolidation happens. And this is what Cory Doctorow has been banging on about forever, is that if we just had good antitrust enforcement, and that's in fact what these guys are bending the knee over, is that they want to keep buying more of their competition and creating more vertical integration within their platforms. And the government should legitimately say no, but they're buying the acquiescence to further consolidation, which, since they're all Trump allies, will help the Trump administration quite a bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is a real weakness in antitrust enforcement in the end, in the sort of constitutional checks and balances in the system that allow the weak antitrust enforcement. And I would also argue, apropos Burkeanism, in the strength of the kind of traditions that upheld serious antitrust practice in the country. If this is how quickly they collapsed, there was something wrong with the civic commitment in the first place.
Well, blaming lack of civic commitment is an insufficiently materialist analysis of the situation. And the correct analysis of the situation is that the unchecked accumulation of wealth and power by American capitalists led to an unprecedented turn toward kleptocratic, consolidated fascist rule. So
yeah,
but you can blame it on civic participation.
Well, and we can just say that even in the confines of classical economic theory, that accumulation of power is just a classic market failure.
Well, that's right. But the government is always necessary to establish and regulate markets, right? The reason that we have market failure is because we haven't pursued antitrust.
Yeah. And so, I mean, then the answer, which you'll be surprised I'm very agreeable to, the answer is far more social democratic kind of policies that will result, however, in less innovation, and I'm very happy with that, by the way. So my vote for social democratic regulation is, I think it's the best in
slow everything down.
Exactly, in a jiu-jitsu kind of fashion. It's the best.
You're the anti-abundance. You want social democracy because it will not bring abundance.
That's exactly right. I love you, and I love Ezra Klein, but that's exactly right. All right, sir. On this note of Christian love, I think we should just say that in a few weeks we'll have Yuval Levin, think tank policymaker, on the show to discuss some of his views about the constitutional order and conservative views of bioethics. We may have Ezra Yudkowsky on the show, so keep listening. Write us in our high-tech email, prostheticgods@gmail.com.
Send us topics. Send us people you want us to interview.
Yep. We're open. All right. See you soon, Doctor.
See you.